This is part 2 of what was God's original diet plan. Part 2 covers an answer why God changed man's diet. In this video, it'll be covered in 3 segments. The first segment will reveal the 3 elements that supported God's decree to decrease man's lifespan by 120 years. The second segment will reveal the impacts of the flood on all of the kingdoms. That's the aquatic kingdom, the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, as well as mankind. And the third will expose the purpose of plants, followed by the finale as why God changed man's diet. So if you're interested in this, then stay tuned. Welcome to the channel if you're new, and if you are returning and you're a subscriber, welcome back. I am so glad that you are here, and we're going to jump right into this video. So if you haven't seen the first video that talks about what was God's original diet plan, then I suggest you watch that one, because it's going to help connect the dots within this one where we're answering why God changed man's diet. And that video is in the show notes, and I also have it in the cards above. So let's talk about the original diet. And it was given to us in Genesis 1, verse 29. And here's how it reads. Every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you I give it as meat. In the first segment, we're going to talk about the elements that supported God's decree to decrease the lifespan of mankind. So that in itself was one of the things that supported it, him making the decree, right? Because if you remember in the first video, we talked about God, when he speaks to us, he's speaking on both dimensions. And when Adam sinned, well, one of the things that happened on the spiritual side was God's glory was disconnected from man, right? That happened instantly. Now, over time, the residue of God's glory was still in the loins of each generation, because if you look at Genesis 9, when God made that decree, people were still living almost 1,000 years. So the residue of God's glory, it was diminishing, but it was diminishing at a slower rate. So God's decree is one of the things that helped him do that. And so we have to think about why he decided to do that anyway. And that was happening in Genesis 6, when the fallen angels were having babies with the women and creating these giants, these hybrid men that were not capable of dwelling with God's spirit, and it grieved God. And so because of that, he decreased the lifespan of man to 120 years. So that decree was one of the things that helped accelerated the depletion of God's glory out of the loins of each generation, because after that you started seeing the lifespan of mankind to decrease at a more rapid rate. That's the first thing. So now the second element was that supported his decree was the flood itself. Well, come to find out, I did a little bit of research, and I came across this guy. But actually, I came across him years ago, but it never connected. I never understood his work in relation to my purpose until this year. But his name was Carl Baugh. He has a creation museum out in Glen Rose, Texas, and I'll put a link up out there to it. And at his museum, and I don't know if this exhibit's still there, but it was depicting the atmosphere, representing what the atmosphere was like before the flood and what happened after the flood. Come to find out, with the earth being submerged in water for so long, impacted the crust of it, and also impacted the atmosphere of oxygen. It decreased it. And so that in turn have an impact on your blood oxygen level. So as that decreases, it accelerates the aging process. So that was number 2. And the third element supporting God's decree to decrease man's lifespan was introducing meat into the diet. Now, how do I know that that helped decrease the lifespan? Well, you know, of course, the Bible is always going to support itself, right? Well, if you go to Daniel 1, I think it was verses 10 through 16, where Nebuchadnezzar took over the Babylonians, and of course, you know, anytime a king take over a territory, they always take the scholars and the smart people to help run their kingdom, right, more efficiently. And Daniel and his three friends were a part of that pack. So I'm going to show you a clip of the Daniel movie that was shot back in 2013, and just to hone in on this fact. Okay, so check this out. I think it's like 3 minutes or something like that, but check this out.
You are summoned for your meal.
Set it here.
Lord Steward, please allow me to ask, what is this meat? Where is it from? And how was it slaughtered?
The cattle are from the king's herd. They are fattened along the river and strangled before the altars of Marduk before their flesh is carried to the kitchens. The swine are from the king's pens. They are fed on choice food. And it is rumored the king's executioner laces their feed with the entrails of his victims, so that the king's chosen may feast and grow strong on the flesh of his enemies. It is considered the greatest of delicacies.
To some, perhaps, but not to us. We are forbidden to eat it. For the Almighty has commanded us, the pig is unclean. You are not to eat their meat or touch their carcasses. Nor can we eat anything sacrificed to gods other than our own.
But the king cannot, he will not change the customs of his hall to fit your wishes. You must know this.
And we will not ask him to.
But you must eat. I have been charged with your well-being. If you are seen to be wasting away, I'm afraid of what my lord the king will do. He will have my head.
And we would not wish it so. Therefore, put your servants to the test. For 10 days, give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance to that of the other young men who eat the royal food.
10 days.
10 days.
And if, after that, your appearance is found wanting?
Then we will do as you wish.
Your request was polite. I'm rather surprised it was honored.
I have no doubt the Lord favorably disposed his heart to hear our request. By the end of 10 days, my companions and I looked healthier and better nourished than the young men who ate the royal food. And so the chief eunuch allowed us to continue refusing the wine and choice fare. And we remained undefiled.
Amazing, right? So those were the three elements: the decree itself, the impact of the flood on the atmosphere, and introducing meat. So that was segment 1. So segment 2, we're going to talk about the flood impact on all of the kingdoms. And what are the kingdoms? We have the aquatic kingdom, the animal kingdom, mankind, and then the plant kingdom. So for the aquatic, if you remember, when God created the aquatic kingdom in Genesis 1, verses 20 through 22, he commanded the water to actually teem with these creatures in order for them to survive and live and breathe, right? So there was zero impact. Now, when it comes to the animal kingdom, well, it was Noah's obedient to God, getting all the clean and unclean animals to come aboard the ark so that after everything is over, they can replenish the earth. Same thing with man. His obedience, he got his family on the ark. Afterwards, they was able to replenish the earth and multiply and subdue it, right? When it comes to the plants that was on the earth, well, it took them a while to survive, right? But what he told Noah on the just before getting on the ark was to get enough of the foods, the plants, so that his family and the animals will be able to sustain their life until the cleansing. was over in 40 days and 40 nights. So that was segment 2. So let's look at segment 3. Segment 3 of this video talks about the unique purposes of plants. That's the fruits, the herbs, and the vegetables. So the first thing that we want to look at, if you remember, and if you've seen the first video where we talked about Revelation 2, and in Revelation 2 of that, it talks about, and I'll read it, where God created the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and mankind from one source, and that was the earth, also known as soil, right? So what does that mean? On a cellular level, every cell in a plant, every cell in animals, every cell in man is looking for a particular mineral and nutrient from the soil, right? So the whole purpose of that is still the same from before the fall. The only difference is that those plants, fruits, and vegetables was designed to refuel the cell. As energy levels started to decrease, eating the food would refuel the cell. It never died, because remember, there was 2 things that God never intended for man, that was to die and to know evil, right? So that food was to keep that cell going. Well, after the fall, the foods still have the same purpose, but there is something, because of the fall, when the cell gets damaged, there is a process called apoptosis. And what apoptosis does in the body, when a cell gets damaged, it is able to go through that apoptosis, which is a programmed death. So a healthy body will be able to go through that process. So depending upon the plant, depending upon the organ within your body and within an animal's body, depending upon the cell attached to it, will dictate which mineral and which nutrients it needs to pull from the soil in order to sustain itself, right? So instead of man and animals eating soil, we eat the plant that has the ability to draw the minerals and the nutrients out of the soil so that we can consume the plant to replenish our cells, if that's making sense to you. Now, I put a video in the description that is a really short video that deep dive a little bit deeper into apoptosis. I'd highly encourage you to take a look at that video. I think it's not even 5 minutes long, but it goes into a little bit more detail, because if you're not living a healthy lifestyle and your body is not able to get rid of a damaged cell, the medical term for that is called cancer. So that is one of the reasons why it is important to have your cells replenished with the foods that God created. So I'm going to show you a quick video. If you don't know who Dr. Bulsiewicz is, you will know before the end of this video. And I also put his information in the description box. And if you're not following him, I encourage you to do so, because I find it amazing that what he is specializing in is the same thing that God showed me in Genesis. And that's one of the things that I do. I love research. I love researching for the truth, because as God was feeding me his truth, I said, okay, well, let me see if I can find someone that is talking about these things. And I ended up finding him. And it just blows my mind how his scientific findings is supporting what God has done for us all this time. And it's really, really simple. So take a look at this video, and we'll come back, and I'll see you right after this. I think it's maybe like three minutes or less. So check out this video.
They say variety is the spice of life, but is it also the spice of a healthy life? How many different foods do you need to eat to stay healthy? So you taught to eat the rainbow. You get a nutrient here, you get a nutrient there, you eat the rainbow, and eventually it all adds up. But is it possible to quantify how many different types of food you need to be eating every single week to maximize your health? That is our goal today, to get that number, and we're turning to the Gut Health MD himself, the pharaoh of fiber, the best-selling author, the man with the master class and the master knowledge when it comes to your health. Dr. Will Bulsiewicz is in the house. Welcome, our good friend, the Gut Health MD himself, Dr. Will Bulsiewicz. Welcome back to the show, my man.
Thank you, Chuck. It's a pleasure to be here. Hello, everyone.
How much variety do we need in our diet to be healthy? How much do we need for a healthy gut? Because she says, Dr. B, she really tends to eat the same things every day, even though they are, in fact, healthy foods.
There are 300,000 edible plants on this planet, and we were consuming a wide variety of them. And now here we are, and our food system wants to kind of contract this down to 70 or 75% of the calories that come from plants in your supermarket come from just 3 plants: wheat, corn, and soy. And that's not trashing those foods, by the way. Wheat, corn, and soy specifically. It's more so that our food system is trying to consolidate into a limited number of plants. So if we want to eat a wide variety, it has to come from us. We have to be the ones to make that choice.
All right, now let's quantify that. So you've got wheat, corn, soy. That's 3, but I'm guessing, man, to really maximize that health, get it to the next level, you're going to need that by many multiples here. I've seen the number 30 thrown around quite a bit when it comes to diversity in the diet. Is that the magic number every 7 days?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. That's a very good question. In some ways, this is the magic number. This is coming from the actual science that shows us that eating a wide variety is, in fact, the right choice in terms of supporting a healthy gut. We're talking about the American Gut Project, Chuck. Any person who's read one of my books, or you've listened to me on podcasts, or frankly have been tuning into the exam room and the conversations that you and I have, they've heard me talk about diversity of plants. And this concept comes from the American Gut Project, which was actually an international study, not just the United States. More than 11,000 people, more than 15,000 microbiome specimens. And they ultimately put these numbers into an equation. And they allowed that equation to basically spit out and tell us what predicts a healthy gut above anything else. And the answer to that question was the diversity of plants in your diet, specifically the people who were consuming more than 30 plants per week had the healthiest guts in the study. And this is an important point because honestly, regardless of what dietary pattern you followed, this was important. So whether you were vegan or pescatarian or vegetarian or an omnivore, either way, eating 30 different varieties of plants per week was the factor that was associated with the healthiest guts. And I think that's an important message for people.
I think that is fantastic. I just love to see where science is finally catching up with God's word. And to be living in such a time as this is wonderful. Now, I know you may not know this, but food has a communication system attached to it that talks to our cells, and there's receptors for those. So depending upon which cell it is, it knows your body signals your body signals that food is in the digestive system and it's ready to receive it. So those receptors, so it knows to go right to that. So what that means is if your diet is not consistently containing the minerals and the nutrient those cells need, then eventually that cell will start to decline in its functionality. And then once that happens, if you don't correct your diet, then it'll start to decline to where it doesn't work anymore. and then you're going to need a replacement. Or depending upon what cell it is, it may cause your physical death. So that's how this is connected. And so it's very, very important for you to understand that. Now, and like I said earlier, because of the plant system, man and animal don't need to eat soil in order to get the nutrients out of it. We have to eat the plants because the plant is the segue of the minerals and the nutrients getting into our body. And so that leads me to purpose number 2 for plants, and that is for fiber to have a better bowel movement. Did you know that a healthy person would have about 3 to 4 bowel movements a day? And that can happen if you have a great number of vegetables in your diet daily. And I know that that number can be different for everybody simply because everybody's microbiome is quite different. But here's what the reality is. Because your digestive system works synergistically together. So it starts out that in your stomach acid has to be acidic enough, and in a healthy body, it's 1 to 3 on the pH scale in order to kill the pathogens off of the food, especially if you didn't get a chance to clean it properly. So if your stomach acid is high enough, it'll kill the pathogens so that it could break the food down in small enough particles so that when it moves to the small intestines where absorption occurs, and in that segment of the digestion, it has to be very sterile. So you don't want pathogens getting into the absorption station because this is going to go into your bloodstream. So now the fiber then transitions into the large intestines because the human body cannot digest fiber, and it goes into the large intestines where it's fermented. And that brings me to the third purpose of plants, and that is to provide microbes to our microbiome, which is in our large intestines. So, I don't think it's any coincidence that we're now living at a time where science and technology can show us how eating plants and animals can impact the human body, especially knowing how the food industry has changed the DNA of foods by using GMOs, using forever chemicals in the productions of food. And these are chemicals that stays in your body forever, wreaking havoc on your nervous system, on so many different systems. And then on top of that, introducing artificial foods. And on top of that, the soil is being depleted of its minerals and vitamins in order for the plants to be able to pull the right amount of minerals and nutrients we need to stay healthy, which in turns has required the need of supplementation. Now that's a different video, but if you're not supplementing, you definitely want to start doing that because of all these things that has happened and changed within our food industry. You do need to take some good food grade supplements. So I'm going to take a look at another video from Dr. B. They call him Dr. B, about the different types of food and how we consume them and its impact on the microbiome. So take a look at this really quick. I think it's like 3 minutes.
I got to tell you, there is a really good question in there already about raw food versus cooked food and what the difference is in your gut, and is one healthier than the other? So we're going to get into that with Dr. Will Bulsiewicz here in just a matter of fact. Let's just go ahead and get into it right now, shall we? Let's welcome Dr. Bulsiewicz to the show. Dr. B, how you doing, man? All right. The first question comes to us from Pam. Wants to know, what is your opinion on raw food versus cooked food? Is one healthier for the gut?
We know that every food has its own unique types of fiber. Those types of fiber feed unique families of microbes. And what's interesting is that there's a researcher at the University of California, San Francisco. His name is Peter Turnbaugh. And he did a study looking at raw versus cooked. So basically, he took the exact same food and he saw the effects of these foods on the gut microbiome, depending on if they were raw versus cooked. And what he found that I thought was really interesting is that you had differing effects based upon whether you cooked the food or you didn't cook the food. Now, is one superior? No, I would not claim that one is categorically superior and that you should exclude the other. Instead, what it is we want, you've heard me say this before, I'll probably say it again in the next couple of minutes. Diversity of plants is the number one predictor of a healthy gut microbiome. And so effectively what I'm saying is if you take the exact same food and you cook it, it's almost like getting two different plants because you are feeding different families of microbes. We want all of our microbes to be fed. So I would not claim that raw versus cooked is superior, one versus the other. Instead, what I would say is that we want both. And for the person who's suffering with digestive issues, it is easier to start with cooked food and work your way towards including the raw foods. But that, a little nibble on some kale or some collards before you go to steam or cook them, that's a good idea because then you're feeding those microbes too.
We want both. That always comes back to variety, whether you're talking about a variety of different kinds of foods, or in this case, a variety of ways to ingest the food itself. I think that, variety just seems to be the theme when it comes to a healthy diet overall.
Well, variety is the theme, and it goes beyond. I mean, in my book, Fiber Fueled, I make my argument that variety is the key to a healthy gut. And we have science, we have several studies at this point now to back that up. But this is not just about gut health. This is also about the reality that every single food, even if we call it a superfood, every single food has its own strengths and weaknesses. They'll have certain vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients, but it will be missing in others. If I ate just kale all day long, I would not be that healthy, even though some people would argue that's the healthiest food on the planet. And so, what you're missing in the kale, you can pick up and find when you add in and sprinkle in some other foods. And that's the beauty of eating a broad, diverse diet, is that there are no longer any weaknesses because you're playing to the strengths of every food.
So you got to love it, right? I mean, his research is really supporting everything that God has shown me. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person on the planet that God has shown this to, but I think it's just wonderful to know that variety can help keep us healthy. And then the way we cook it, he talked about cooking it versus raw, and then of course there's fermentation that we can do, and also sprouting. We talked a little bit about sprouting, and eating sprouted foods is really, really good for you as well. So what's the takeaway so far? Here's the takeaway. And we talked about this in the first video, where man is made from two sources: the spiritual, which is God, and the physical, which is the soil. So in order to stay healthy, we've got to stay connected to both, right? Because we made of both dimensions. And how do we do that? The best way to stay connected on the spiritual side, number one, accepting Jesus Christ as your Savior. That's the first step. The second thing is to pray daily about all things. The third thing is to read the Word of God on a daily basis. And the fourth thing is to take action on God's Word only. Now, how do you stay connected on the physical? That's being in touch with the soil. Number one, consuming fruits, vegetables, and herbs that God made from the soil. Number two, consuming grass-fed animals. That'll help. And number three, getting grounded by walking barefoot outside or investing in a grounding products. Now, I know we didn't talk about grounding, but that's something you definitely want to learn more about. And if you want me to do a video on that, I can, because I do have some grounding products. But I did put some information about that in the show notes. Now, one of the things that I talked about in staying connected with the soil is eating grass-fed animals, because come to find out, and I don't know if this was because of the flood and the plants that survived, but there are some minerals and nutrients that our digestive system cannot convert into a bioavailable form. And the one that stands out to me is actually two, is iron and K2. K2 is a fat-soluble vitamin that is required to push calcium into the places that we want it, like in your bones and in your teeth, those places, and to also be available for other chemical reactions within the body. Well, of course, having a diet with the right fats will help you pull that off, because vitamin D works closely with calcium. It pulls calcium in the body, but it doesn't tell it where to go. It's vitamin K2 is what pushes and takes the calcium into the places that it goes. And some of the best sources for K2 is grass-fed animals. And of course, that's the same thing with iron. The vitamins, the iron that you get from plants are not bioavailable, but it is available in the meat of grass-fed animals. And in the show notes, I'm not going over that today in this video. So what I've done, I put some information, a couple of videos that you can look at. I think it's from Dr. Berg, talks about K2 and how it impacts the body, and some sources that you can get that from. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Now, for what you've been waiting for, what is it, Trina? Why God had to change man's diet? And it's simply this: because after the flood, all plant life was inevitable, right? And remember, in the first video, we talked about when man fell, the spiritual attributes that left his brain, that was deactivated in his brain, because remember, we was made in God's image. Adam was able to speak to the plants, speak to the ground, and tell it what he wanted, and it would manifest. Well, fruits, plants, vegetables, they require time, seed, and harvest. Seed, time, and harvest is what they need in order for us to be able to take part in its fruits or in its benefits. So when they got off the boat, none of the plants on the planet were edible. And he had enough food for them during the 40 days, right? So he did plant a vineyard right after getting off the boat. So he knew to save the seeds, because he know that it's the seed that he drop it in the soil will yield a harvest. He had to wait for that, right? So that is the truth. But we know that eating meat was not God's best for man. But you still can have it. Now, I'm not a vegetarian, but I do eat vegetarians. As I've gotten older, I learned better, you do better. And so if you've been fighting with your diet, I hope this set you free. And if it did, share it with someone else so it can set them free. Because we need a variety of plants, no matter, just like Dr. B said in his video, it really doesn't matter which diet plan that you have. You need to make sure that you're getting enough of God's fruits and vegetables in its variety in your diet. That's it. So I hope you found value in this video, and if so, like, share, subscribe, ring the bell so that you won't miss another video. Now, I know this video was a little late, but it is what it is. But my thing is that I'm on this mission because God sent me on this mission to be able to help transform the body of Christ and anybody that is being beaten up by the world. And so hopefully you can find some answers to help you live better, feel better, move better, so that you can have a life like it is in heaven, where there's nothing missing, nothing broken, and there's more